Hey,
The Apache widow ordered,
Wake up!
"Share my bed or freeze
You
to
can't
death."
leave me here.
The wind came
Please say
first,
something.
sharp and sudden, cutting across the land like a blade. It swept down from the mountains and rolled over the open plains, carrying ice and darkness with it. The sky turned the color of old steel, and snow began to fall in thick, heavy sheets. What had started as a cold evening became a fight for life in less than an hour. The traveler was alone. He had been warned not to cross this stretch of land so late in the season. People at the last trading post had shaken their heads when he said he would keep going. Winter here did not forgive mistakes, but he was tired of waiting, tired of fear, and certain he could reach the next settlement before nightfall. Now, with the storm closing in, that confidence felt foolish. His horse struggled, hooves sinking into snow that had not been there that morning. The wind stole his breath and burned his lungs. Every step forward took more strength than the last. Ice clung to his coat, his beard, his lashes. He tried to shield his face, but the cold slipped through every gap. He did not see the rock until it was too late. The horse stumbled, panicked, and went down hard. The man was thrown into the snow, pain flashing through his leg and shoulder. By the time he pulled himself up, the horse had already broken free and vanished into the white distance, driven by fear and instinct. He called out once, then again, but the wind swallowed his voice. Alone now, injured and on foot, he tried to walk. Each step sent a sharp ache through his leg. The cold pressed in from every side, heavy and endless. He had crossed dangerous lands before, faced hunger and heat and men with weapons. But cold was different. Cold did not rush or shout, it waited. As night fell, the world grew smaller. Snow blurred the ground and sky into one endless pale wall. He could no longer tell direction. His thoughts slowed. He began to feel strangely calm, almost sleepy, which frightened him more than the pain. That was when he saw the cabin. At first he thought it was a trick of the storm, a dark shape, half hidden by trees and drifting snow. He blinked hard, forced his eyes to focus. The shape did not move. Smoke rose faintly from a low chimney. Hope struck him with sudden force. He pushed forward, dragging his leg, driven by the thought of warmth. By the time he reached the door, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely lift them. He knocked once weakly, then leaned against the rough wood to keep from falling. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the door opened. A woman stood there, tall and still, framed by firelight. Her hair was dark and long, streaked with gray, braided simply down her back. Her face was marked by years of sun and wind, her eyes sharp and steady. She wore heavy clothing meant for work, not comfort. A rifle rested easily in her hands, not raised but ready. She did not speak at first. She studied the man as one might study an injured animal, carefully, without rushing. She saw the way he leaned, the blood darkening his trousers, the frost stiff on his coat. She smelled the storm on him, the edge of death that clung close. "You'll freeze if you stand there," she said at last. Her voice was calm, low, carrying no warmth and no cruelty. He tried to answer, but his teeth chattered too hard. He nodded once, clumsy and weak. She stepped aside. Inside, the cabin was small but solid. A fire burned in a stone hearth, filling the room with a dull, steady heat. Animal hides covered the floor. Simple tools hung on the walls. Everything had its place. Nothing was wasted. The woman closed the door behind him and slid a heavy bar into place. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Only then did his strength give out. He sank to the floor, breath coming in short gasps. The heat made the pain worse at first, sharp and sudden, but he welcomed it. He was alive, for now. She knelt beside him, quick and efficient. She cut away the frozen cloth around his leg, her movements practiced. The wound was not deadly, but it was bad enough. Untreated, it would slow him, maybe kill him in weather like this. "You shouldn't be here," she said, not unkindly. "Storm like this doesn't care how brave you think you are." "I know," he managed to say. I thought I could make it." She snorted softly, a sound halfway between humor and bitterness. Most do, she replied. She cleaned the wound and wrapped it tightly, using clean cloth she had clearly prepared long before. She gave him water, then something warm to drink. He felt it spread through him, easing the shaking in his hands. Only after she was done did she stand and step back. "Who are you?" he asked. She hesitated just for a moment. "People call me the widow," she said. "That's enough." He nodded. He had heard stories, a woman who lived alone on the edge of nowhere. A woman whose husband had been killed years ago, leaving her with land no one wanted and strength few could match. Some said she was dangerous. Others said she was simply done trusting the world. She watched him closely now, measuring. "You can stay," she said, "for the night." Relief flooded his face so clearly that she almost looked away. "But understand this," she continued. "Out there you wouldn't last an hour. In here you live by my rules." He swallowed. "I understand." Outside, the storm screamed against the walls, shaking the cabin as if trying to tear it apart. Snow piled higher against the door. The widow added more wood to the fire, her movements steady, practiced. This was not her first winter alone. It was not her worst storm. She handed him a blanket, thick and worn. "Sleep near the fire," she said. As he lay there, wrapped in warmth at last, he watched her move around the cabin. She cooked, cleaned, checked the door, the windows, the roof. Every action showed long habit, the kind built from years of doing everything herself. "Why do you live so far out?" he asked quietly. She did not answer right away. "Because no one bothers you here," she said finally, "and because the land remembers." He did not ask what she meant. The fire crackled. Shadows danced along the walls. The storm showed no sign of stopping. As his eyes grew heavy, he felt something else beneath the relief. Unease. He was safe from the cold, but he was not in control. This place belonged to her, and he was entirely at her mercy. The widow sat across from him, watching the fire, her face unreadable. Outside, the night deepened, and the storm pressed closer, sealing them both inside a silence filled with past choices and the promise of hard decisions yet to come. The man woke to the sound of the wind still howling outside the cabin. For a few confused seconds he thought he was back in the storm, buried in snow. Then the warmth reached him. The steady heat of the fire, the thick blanket around his body, the solid floor beneath him. He opened his eyes slowly. The widow was already awake. She sat near the hearth, feeding small pieces of wood into the fire with careful hands. The flames reflected in her eyes, making them look darker, deeper. She did not turn when she sensed him stirring, but she spoke as if she had been waiting. "You're alive," she said. "That's good." He pushed himself up slightly, wincing as pain shot through his leg. It was better than before, dulled but still there, a reminder of how close he had come to ending up beneath the snow. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough. "For last night." She nodded once. No smile, no softness. Gratitude was something she accepted without ceremony. "The storm hasn't passed," she said. "It won't today." He looked toward the small window. It was nearly covered with snow, the light outside pale and weak. The world beyond the cabin might as well not exist. "How long?" he asked. "Hard to say," she replied. "One day, maybe more." His stomach tightened. He had supplies for a journey, not for being trapped. He was injured, alone except for a woman who did not owe him anything. She rose and handed him a bowl of thick stew. It smelled simple but filling. He took it with shaking hands, realizing how hungry he was. As he ate, he felt her eyes on him, weighing, calculating. "Tell me why you were out there," she said. He swallowed and answered honestly. He spoke of the work he had left behind, of the promise of better pay farther west, of how waiting had felt worse than risk. He did not try to sound brave. He did not hide his mistakes. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she let out a slow breath. "Men come through here often enough," she said. "Most don't make it to my door. Those who do usually bring trouble with them." "I'm not trouble," he said quickly, then stopped himself. Words were easy. Proof was harder. She studied him again. Trouble doesn't always know what it is, she said. The day dragged on slowly. The storm battered the cabin without pause. Snow fell so thick it pressed against the walls like a living thing. The widow moved through her tasks with calm precision, checking the fire, rationing food, keeping the room warm but not wasteful. He tried to help, but she stopped him. "Your leg needs rest," she said. "If it gets worse, you won't walk out of here at all." That truth settled heavy in his chest. As the hours passed, the silence between them grew thicker. It was not peaceful, it was sharp, watchful. Each was aware of the other's presence at all times. As evening approached, the cold deepened. The fire struggled to keep up. The widow frowned, calculating again. "Fuel won't last forever," she said, "and the nights are the worst." He nodded. "I'll leave as soon as the storm breaks." She looked at him then, really looked. There was something hard in her gaze now, something resolved. "You won't," she said. He frowned. "What do you mean?" She stood and walked to the door. With a strong push, she opened it just enough for the wind to scream inside. Snow rushed in, sharp and biting. The cold cut through him instantly. "Go," she said evenly. He stared at the white chaos beyond the threshold. He could barely see a few steps ahead. The wind pushed back like an unseen wall. She closed the door again. "That's what waits for you," she said. "Not tomorrow, not tonight, now." His mouth went dry. "I didn't say I'd go now," he said quietly. "No," she agreed, "but you're thinking you'll decide when it's time, that you still have a choice." She turned to face him fully. "You don't," she said. The words were not shouted. That made them heavier. "This cabin has one room," she continued. "One fire, one place where warmth lasts through the night. I won't freeze so a stranger can keep his distance." He understood then that this was not a request she was building toward. It was a line already drawn. The air felt tighter. "I don't want to take anything from you," he said. "I'll sleep by the door, I'll take less food. She raised a hand, stopping him. "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't about kindness or comfort, it's about survival." She gestured to the room, the fire, the walls that held back death. "Out there," she said, "cold takes everything, pride first." He said nothing. His thoughts raced, but no path forward looked clean. He was alive because of her. He would stay alive only if she allowed it. The widow's voice softened just slightly. "I lost my husband in winter," she said. "Not to cold, to men, but winter finished what they started." He did not interrupt. "I learned then," she went on, "that the world doesn't care what you deserve. It only cares what you do to endure." She looked at him steadily. "I will not die alone in my own home," she said, "not because of rules that never protected me." The fire cracked loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. He felt a mix of fear, shame, and understanding twist inside him. This woman was not cruel. She was carved by loss and years of standing alone against a hard land. "What if I say no?" he asked quietly. She did not hesitate. "Then you leave," she said, "and the storm decides." Silence fell again, long and heavy. At last he nodded. "I hear you," he said. That was all he could say without lying. Night came quickly. Darkness pressed against the windows. The widow prepared the space with simple efficiency, laying out blankets near the fire where warmth could reach both of them. There was no softness in the act, no ceremony. "This is not comfort," she said. "It's necessity." "I know," he replied. They lay down on opposite sides of the fire's reach, the heat between them like a boundary as much as a blessing. He kept his body stiff, his thoughts restless. Sleep did not come easily. The storm howled louder than before, as if angry at being denied another life. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her breathing, steady and controlled. He realized then how much strength it took to live as she did, how many nights she must have spent making choices no one should have to make. Somewhere between fear and exhaustion, his eyes finally closed. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, two survivors lay awake in the same shelter, bound not by comfort or desire, but by the simple, unyielding need to see another morning. Morning came slowly, as if the sun itself was unsure whether it should rise. The light that slipped through the small window was weak and pale, filtered through layers of snow and cloud. The storm had not ended. It had only changed its voice. The wild screams of the night softened into a deep, steady wind that never fully stopped. The man woke with a dull ache in his leg and a heavier weight in his chest. For a moment he lay still, listening. The fire was low but alive. The cabin was quiet except for the wind outside and the soft sounds of movement. The widow was already up. She moved carefully, as she always did, stepping around the small space with purpose. She added wood to the fire, stirred a pot hanging over the flames, and checked the door and window as if the storm might suddenly find a way in. Neither of them spoke at first. What had been decided the night before did not need words now. It hung between them, thick and uncomfortable. Not anger, not fear alone, something more complex, something shaped by need and consequence. The man shifted, trying to sit up. She noticed at once. "Easy," she said. "Don't force it." "I can help today," he replied. "I won't just lie here." She considered this, then nodded once. "You can do what doesn't strain your leg," she said. "Small things." That was more than he expected. He ate slowly, grateful again for the simple food. Each bite reminded him that he was still alive, still warm. Outside, the world remained frozen and hostile. Inside, life continued in careful balance. As the day passed, they settled into a strange rhythm. He cleaned tools while seated. He folded cloth and stacked firewood near the hearth. She handled the harder tasks, never showing pain or fatigue, though he could see the wear in her shoulders and hands. They spoke little, but when they did, it was practical. "Hand me that," she said. "Is this enough?" he asked. "Yes, that's fine." The silence between them slowly changed. It was no longer sharp. It became something closer to watchful calm. At one point, while she was checking the supplies, he noticed how little there truly was. Food carefully stored, wood counted and measured, nothing wasted. Every choice she made had been shaped by long winters and harder lessons. "You've lived like this a long time," he said quietly. "Yes," she answered. "Does it ever get easier?" She paused, then shook her head. "You get stronger," she said. "That's not the same thing." The wind rose again by afternoon, rattling the walls. Snow drifted higher against the cabin. The widow stared at the window for a long moment, her jaw tight. "It wants to keep us," she said. He understood what she meant. The storm was not just weather. It was a force that tested patience, strength, and will. It wore people down not in moments, but in hours and days. As evening approached, the temperature dropped again. The fire had to be fed more often. The widow grew quieter, more focused. Survival was not dramatic. It was careful and tiring. When night came, it felt heavier than the one before. They prepared the space again, moving with the same quiet understanding. There was no argument, no hesitation. What had been decided was simply done. The man lay staring into the fire, his thoughts restless. He felt many things at once: gratitude, discomfort, a deep awareness of how fragile his life was here. "I won't stay longer than I have to," he said suddenly. She did not look at him. "I know," she replied. "I don't want to take from you," he added. She turned then, meeting his eyes. "Survival always takes something," she said, "from everyone." They lay down again, the fire between them. This time sleep came more easily, though it was not deep. He dreamed of walking through endless snow, always seeing shelter just beyond reach. He woke suddenly in the night. The fire had burned low. The air felt colder. He heard her breathing, slower now, less controlled. He realized she was exhausted. Strong, yes, but not endless. Carefully, slowly, he reached for more wood and fed the fire. The movement sent pain through his leg, but he clenched his teeth and continued. The flames grew, warmth spreading again. She stirred but did not wake. He lay back down, heart pounding, realizing something had shifted. Not the situation, not the danger, but the way he saw her. She was not just the woman with power here. She was someone who had carried too much alone for too long. Morning came again. The storm finally began to weaken. The wind softened. Snow still fell, but lighter now, slower. The widow noticed first. "It's changing," she said. Hope stirred in him, cautious and small. "Does that mean—" "Not yet," she said, "but soon." They spent the day preparing for that moment. She showed him the path he would need to take once he could walk properly. She checked his leg, nodding with approval at how it was healing. "You'll limp," she said, "but you'll move." "That's enough," he replied. As the hours passed, something else changed too. They talked more. Not about the past in detail, but about small things, where he grew up. What the land used to look like before storms like this came so often. How silence could feel louder than noise. When evening came, the storm finally broke. The wind died down to a whisper. The snow slowed, then stopped. The world outside the cabin lay buried and still. They stood by the door together, listening. "It's over," he said softly. She nodded. "For now," she replied. That night felt different. The danger was not gone, but it was no longer pressing against the walls. The fire burned steady and calm. As they lay down for the last time under the same roof, the air felt lighter. Tomorrow he would leave. They both knew it. Neither spoke of it aloud. Outside, the land rested under its white cover, silent and waiting, as two lives prepared to move forward, changed not by comfort but by endurance, and by the quiet understanding that survival sometimes creates bonds no one expects and no one forgets. The morning felt different. Not warmer, but lighter. The air inside the cabin no longer carried the sharp edge of danger. The fire burned steady without needing constant care. Outside, the wind had fallen quiet and the silence felt deep, almost respectful. The man woke before the widow this time. He lay still for a while, listening. No storm, no roar of wind, just the soft crack of wood in the fire and the slow sound of her breathing. He turned his head slightly and looked at the ceiling, darkened by years of smoke. This place had protected him when nothing else could. That truth settled heavy in his chest. Carefully, he sat up. His leg still hurt, but the pain was manageable now, a dull reminder instead of a sharp warning. He tested his weight slowly and felt relief when it held. When he turned, he saw the widow watching him. "You're moving better," she said. "I think I can walk," he replied. Slowly, she nodded. "That's enough." She rose and went to the door, lifting the bar. Cold air slipped in, but it was gentle now, not violent. She opened the door wider. The land outside lay quiet and white, untouched, peaceful in a way that only came after great force had passed. He stood beside her, taking it in. "I wouldn't be standing here," he said softly, "if not for you." She kept her eyes on the horizon. "You would have found another way," she said. He shook his head. "No, I wouldn't have." She did not answer. They spent the morning in calm preparation. She showed him how to wrap his leg properly for travel, how to keep warmth without wasting strength. She packed a small bundle of food for him, more than he expected. "You'll need it," she said when he protested. He accepted it with quiet gratitude. As they worked, the silence between them felt different again. It was no longer tense or watchful. It carried weight but also respect. At last he spoke. "Why did you help me?" he asked. "You could have turned me away." She paused, her hands still. "For a long time," she said slowly, "I told myself I lived alone because I wanted to, that it made me stronger." She tied the bundle closed and handed it to him. "The truth," she continued, "is that after my husband died, I stopped believing anyone would choose to stay." He did not interrupt. "I learned to survive without expecting help," she said, "and without offering it." She looked at him then, her gaze steady but unguarded. "When you knocked on my door," she said, "I saw someone who would not last the night, and I knew what it meant to be left to the cold." He felt something tighten in his throat. "I didn't come here to change your life," he said. "I know," she replied. "You came here because you had no choice." They stood quietly after that, each lost in thought. As midday approached, the sun climbed higher, reflecting off the snow so brightly it hurt the eyes. The path she had described before was now visible, a narrow trail through the trees, difficult but possible. He slung the bundle over his shoulder. "I'll remember this place," he said. "And you?" She nodded once. "Memory is enough," she said. He hesitated at the door. "If you ever need help," he said, unsure how to finish. She gave a small, almost unseen smile. "I've survived this long," she said. "Don't worry about me." He stepped outside. The cold met him, but it no longer felt like an enemy. He took a few careful steps, testing his balance. The pain was there, but it did not stop him. He turned back once. She stood in the doorway, framed by the cabin she had built her life around. Strong, alone, unbroken. "Thank you," he said again, because some words deserved repeating. She inclined her head. "Walk steady," she said. He did. Each step away felt heavier than he expected, not because of pain, but because leaving meant closing a chapter that had changed him. He realized he would carry this with him, not as a debt, but as understanding. Behind him, the widow watched until he disappeared into the trees. Then she closed the door. The cabin felt larger without him, quieter. The silence returned, but it was no longer sharp. It was familiar. She tended the fire, cleaned the space, returned everything to order. Survival did not pause for reflection. Still, as she moved, her thoughts followed the path he had taken. She had not saved him out of kindness alone. She had done it because, for the first time in years, she had allowed herself to share the burden of living. Outside, the man moved slowly through the snow-covered land, each step deliberate. The world felt vast again, uncertain and demanding, but he felt different now. Stronger, not in body but in spirit. He knew that when he reached the next settlement, life would continue. Work. Struggle, choice. But he would never forget the winter that taught him the cost of pride and the power of quiet endurance. And the widow, standing alone at the edge of nowhere, returned to her life with a truth she could no longer deny. Survival was not just about standing against the cold. Sometimes it was about letting someone stand beside you, if only for a season, and walking away changed. The journey away from the cabin was slow but steady. The man moved carefully, placing each step with thought, listening to his body and the land around him. Snow crunched beneath his boots, clean and bright under the pale sun. The sky was clearer now, wide and calm, as if the storm had never existed. Yet he knew better. The land never forgot what it was capable of. As the hours passed, the pain in his leg reminded him not to rush. He stopped often, resting, drinking small amounts of water, eating sparingly from the food the widow had packed. Each time he did, he thought of her hands tying the bundle firm and sure. He carried more than supplies on his back. He carried memory. By late afternoon, he reached higher ground where the snow thinned and the path grew clearer. From there, he could see the long stretch of land ahead, leading toward distant signs of life. Smoke from far-off homes rose faintly into the air. The sight filled him with relief, but also with something else, an unexpected weight. Safety was close now, but part of him felt reluctant to leave behind what had changed him. When he finally reached the settlement, people noticed him at once. His limp, his worn clothes, the marks of cold still clinging to him told a clear story. A few helped him inside, offered food, asked questions. He answered only what was needed. Some things felt too personal to explain. That night, lying in a proper bed with walls thick and warm around him, he did not sleep well. The quiet felt wrong, too still. He missed the sound of the fire, the steady wind against the cabin walls, the presence of someone who understood silence. In the days that followed, his leg healed slowly. He found work again, light tasks at first, then more as his strength returned. Life resumed its familiar rhythm, but he was no longer the same man who had walked into the storm believing confidence was enough. He listened more now, to weather, to people, to his own limits. Sometimes, when winter winds rattled the windows, his thoughts returned to the cabin. He wondered how the widow fared, whether the land had been kind to her, whether the quiet felt different after he left. Far from the settlement, the widow continued her life as she always had. The morning after his departure, she rose early, tending the fire, checking her stores, walking the land around her home. The storm had left its marks, fallen branches, deep drifts, broken paths, but nothing she could not handle. Yet something had changed. The cabin no longer felt quite the same. It was still strong, still hers, but it carried an echo now. A reminder that for a brief time she had not faced the winter alone. She found herself pausing more often, standing by the door, listening to the quiet with new awareness. She did not regret her choices. Survival had demanded them, but she also did not forget the nights when silence had been shared, when strength had been divided instead of carried alone. As weeks passed, winter loosened its grip. Snow melted slowly, revealing dark earth beneath. The widow prepared for spring as she always did, planting, repairing, planning ahead. Life moved forward, steady and demanding. One afternoon, as she worked near the edge of her land, she noticed tracks in the dirt. Human tracks, fresh. Her hand rested on the tool she carried, not in fear but habit. She followed the path carefully until she saw a figure approaching from the distance. It was him. He walked slower than before, but with confidence. His legs still favored him slightly, but his steps were sure. He stopped several paces away, respectful, waiting. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," he said. She studied him, searching his face for truth. She found no need for words right away. "You healed," she said. "Yes," he replied, "because you helped me." She nodded, accepting that as fact. "I came back," he said, "to return what I owe." He held out a small bundle. Inside were supplies he had gathered, tools, cloth, things she could use. Nothing excessive, nothing wasted. "I don't expect anything," he added. "I just didn't want to walk away without closing the circle." She took the bundle, weighing it in her hands. "You didn't owe me," she said. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I wanted to come back anyway." They stood in silence, the land stretching wide around them. "You won't stay," she said. "No," he answered honestly, "but I won't forget." That was enough. She turned and walked back toward the cabin. After a moment he followed. They shared a simple meal, spoke of small things, of weather and work and the slow return of life after winter. There were no promises, no plans made, only understanding. When it was time for him to leave again, the parting felt lighter this time, complete. "Walk steady," she said, the same words as before. "I will," he replied. He left without looking back, knowing some places were meant to shape you, not hold you. The widow watched until he was gone, then returned to her work. The land felt familiar again, whole. Winter would come again. Hard choices would return. But now she knew something she had once denied. Strength did not vanish when shared. And somewhere beyond the hills, a man carried that truth forward, letting it guide him through every storm yet to come.